The second thing that I want you to notice in these words is that he said, "Do you truly love me?" Now, in the Greek language, there are 4 different Greek words that are translated into English as love. And so, in order to understand the essence of what the Greek text is saying, whenever we see the word love, we need to find out which one of those 4 Greek words is being used. The 4 words are storge, eros, phileo, and agape. Storge is used in the sense of, I love pizza, I love my car. It uses love in that way. Eros is a love that is referring to a sexual type of love. Phileo is referring to a friendship or brotherly love. Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. And then agape is referring to an unconditional love. A love with no strings attached. A love which means that you'll stick it out to the very end. And so when Jesus asked Peter, "Peter, do you truly love me?" Jesus asked him, "Do you agape me? Do you love me unconditionally?" Peter responded by saying, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." But he said, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you as a friend." Jesus asked, "Do you love me unconditionally?" Peter responded, "You know that I love you as a friend." On the one hand, Jesus must have been disappointed. I'm sure he wanted Peter to say, "Yes, Lord, I love you unconditionally." But yet, on Peter's side of things, he had been so bold in the past. "Others may deny you, but I'll stick with you till the very end. I will even give my life for you." And Peter knew that even though those were the words that he said, and that was his desire when he spoke to Jesus in the upper room, he knew that he didn't follow through. And so in this case, I believe that Peter is being very careful about the words that he selects. Because he wants to be honest. He wants to be able to be true. He wants to be able to follow through. And so Peter, choosing his words very carefully, didn't say, "I love you unconditionally," but he said, I love you as a friend. The third thing that I want you to notice in Jesus' first question to Peter is that he said, "Do you love me more than these?" Now we don't know exactly what it is that Jesus is referring to when he says that, "Do you love me more than these?" He may be referring to the other disciples. I don't think that that's what Jesus is referring to, because later on in the passage, Peter says, "Well, what about him? What about John?" Jesus is challenging Peter, and to try and divert attention away from himself, Peter says to Jesus, "Well, what about John over there? What do you expect out of him?" And Jesus said, it doesn't matter what happens with John. If I want John to live until I come again, that's what will happen. You don't need to concern yourself with someone else's affairs. So the fact that Jesus responded to Peter in that way, when he says, "Do you love me more than these?" I don't think he's referring to the other disciples. I think what he was probably referring to were the fish. Now, remember, there was a net full of fish that they'd pulled up on the shore, and I think Jesus is pointing to those fish and saying, "Do you love me more than these, Peter? Do you love me more than these fish? Do you love me more than fishing?" Peter had originally been a fisherman before Jesus called him to be a fisher of men, one of his disciples. And in the midst of his guilt and his struggles and his confusion, I'm sure in recent days, Peter's been struggling about, do I continue to be a disciple, or do I just go back to fishing? And so I think that Jesus, when he says to Peter, "Do you love me more than these?" he's saying, "Do you love me more than fishing? Do you love me more than your job?" That may be a question that Jesus is asking us as well. Do you love me more than your job? Do you love me more than your friends? Do you love me more than partying? Do you love me more than sports? Do you love me more than the sin that is so inviting in your life? do you love me more than these? The first time Jesus asked Peter, do you love me unconditionally? Peter responds by saying, I love you as a friend. Now, as we read the story from the pages of Scripture, there's three questions, one right after another. Jesus saying, do you love me? Do you love me? And Peter gives a response, and then Jesus gives Peter some sort of an admonition or instruction after each of his responses. And as we read this passage, we see those questions one right after another. But I don't know that they necessarily happen that quickly in sequence. As we go on down in the passage, in verse 25, John writes that Jesus did other things, but all of them were not written down. I believe that John was making a summary statement about the whole book of John at that point, that it didn't contain everything that Jesus said or everything that Jesus did, but I believe that it could apply to this story as well. I think Jesus probably asked once, then there was some other conversation. He asked, do you love me a second time? There was other conversation, and then he asked him the third time. The second time Jesus asked, Simon, do you love me? He didn't add on that phrase, more than these. He simply asked him, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? Simon, son of John, do you truly love me unconditionally? Jesus is taking a little pressure off. He's saying to Peter, it doesn't matter where you are in comparison to anyone else or anything else, but do you love me unconditionally? Once again, Peter responds cautiously. He says, you know that I love you as a friend.